Welcome back to It's Only Money here on Real Radio 104.1 with financial advisors from Edgewater Family Wealth. EdgewaterFamilyWealth.com is the website. We have Scott Brown here with his right-hand man, Tammy. And good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's so good to be here. I'm Ryan. You know me from the Monsters in the Morning. And I'm ready to get those sweet, sweet numbers. That's how we do it sometimes. We just throw Tammy to the wolves, and we get those numbers with Tammy right now.
Oh, yeah, that's how the day should start.
Yeah.
Every day. That's how you want to have a bright day ahead of you. We're starting with unemployment numbers that came out last week. Those were fantastic. The market maybe doesn't like them as much, but we like them. What do you think, Scott?
Well, as we've discussed previously, sometimes good news is bad news, and sometimes bad news is good news, right? So to interpret the data is to say, well, okay, so unemployment is not going up, which means the economy is still strong. If you're working, you have money. If you have money, you're spending money. If you're spending money, it's driving up what? Inflation, right? So the Fed looks at the improving unemployment numbers as a potential tighten, and the market certainly looks at the improving unemployment numbers as a potential for tightening by the Fed. Now, you're going to argue, I think, that the Fed is just messing with us.
That's a possibility there is something that you can see every meeting. You can see the voting of all the Fed. They call it the chairman council in there, like how they vote.
Do they wear robes and stuff?
It feels like they should if they don't.
Yeah, like in a basement with some candles burning, and they all wear robes and chant.
Oh,
Is that something different?
About it that way.
Am I thinking of something else?
I'm picturing an Eyes Wide Shut situation.
Oh,
like there's that sound in the background,
and they're wearing like the goat head thing. Yeah.
Oh boy,
which is really creepy.
Yeah, but that's not it. You can watch this, and they're just in suits, probably.
Yeah, I think you're watching a different channel.
Fair enough.
But to that point, yes, usually when you look up the how the Fed members vote on this, you'd see varying opinions. But for the past two meetings, all of them had one voice, spoke with one tone, and they give no optimism at all.
A chorus of no optimism.
Yes. Now, some would argue that this course is because they're trying to set a narrative for the market. They're hoping that they don't raise the rates, but they want the market to believe that.
They're trying to talk the market down, or they're trying to talk the economy down without having to throw a net over it.
Yes, that will be an ideal scenario if it works.
Right.
And we saw in July when the chairman was a little bit hesitant and people started thinking, yeah, they might be pivoting soon.
Yeah.
The market rallied.
Right.
And as soon as it did, they came out and said, no pivoting. There will be pain. This is going to take some time. We're going all the way in, et cetera, et cetera.
That's not the American way, Tammy. We want to fix now, right now. Do we not, Ryan? Right now.
Yeah, waiting is not for us.
We don't wait.
No, that's for Europeans.
Yeah, they wait. We don't wait.
Wait a minute. Wasn't it the way that we grow money is by doing the boring stuff, right?
Oh, that's true.
And that includes waiting.
Okay.
Ooh,
whatever.
Yeah. You and your logic.
Yeah, that's the numbers, man. I'm sorry. We wait for the fun stuff with Scott. But
all right. So let's recap here. We see that unemployment has improved. Depending on which news channel you watch, that's good news or bad news. You can find either. So we see the unemployment improving, which means the Fed will say, well, that'll lead to more inflation. And if it leads to more inflation, we have to tighten. Your Tammy's numbers tell him that the Fed may just be trying to spread a narrative so they don't actually have to tighten.
Yes. Because the result is what matters.
Right.
The result is market does not rally for now.
Right.
Because that will lead to the financial conditions not loosening prematurely.
Yeah.
Which what they don't want right now.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's tone matters, right? This is what I've said about presidents, and we could say the same maybe about Fed presidents, right? Is that tone matters. What you're saying, you're trying to coach it up, as they say in sports, right? You're trying to coach the market up one way or the other. Presidents trying to set a tone of some kind. Sometimes they're good at it. Sometimes they're bad at it. But the reality is the outcome is what matters. And what you're saying is we have to have patience and kind of wade through these next, whatever it is, 2 or 3 or 4 quarters, depending on how long this takes, to get back to some kind of normal vibe in the markets. In the meantime, what we're seeing is fixed income rates, right? CDs, savings accounts, money markets, treasuries, things that we would consider boring, stable investments paying better than they have been at the very least rates. Now, the argument against that would be to say, well, that's great, Scott. Treasury, 2 years Treasury is paying 4%. That's not exciting. You know why it's not exciting? Because inflation 7% or 8%, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but it's it's the same animal. 6 months ago, 12 months ago, the 2 year was paying what? Less than 1, right?
Oh, way less. Than
like 50 basis points,
like
25,
even less.
So 25 basis points, but inflation was 2. So the ratio is about the same. It just feels better, I think, to some people on fixed incomes to see those fixed income rates coming up.
Absolutely. And let's not forget that fixed income, the way they are trying to invest in, they're buying very heavily discounted bonds.
Yeah.
And then sometimes even selling them later on.
Oh.
When yield, say, for example, because we discussed this before about how yield and the prices of fixed income move in comparison to the interest rate. So there is a new element now about fixed income portfolios where they buy, but not buy to hold until maturity, but buy to sell at the best opportunity.
So now we're talking about a trade, and we're going to talk about that in a minute about trading. But the idea that you're explaining is about really when you say fixed income, just so people at home know, you're talking about bonds.
Bonds, yes.
Right? So if you buy a corporate bond, IBM issues a bond to build a building, and they want to pay you 6%. You loan them the money, they build the building and pay you 6% and your money back. Another kind of bond is a treasury bond, right? You're loaning money to the U.S. government so they can buy $500 toilet seats or whatever they do with it, right? And then they pay you a rate of interest. I mean, I just one example, but they pay you a rate of interest and then they give you your money back, right? So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about bonds, and sometimes when rates jump up real quickly, the bond that you're currently holding on to will drop in price.
It will,
at least temporarily, and this is where we get into a sticky wicket. People get all freaked out because their $100 bond is trading at 95 without really thinking through the fact that when it matures, it's going to mature at 100. You're going to get all your money back, assuming it doesn't default.
Yes.
Right. But what you're talking about is if I'm now entering the bond market and Scott's got a bond trading at 95 that he owns that he wants to get rid of for whatever desperate reason he wants to get rid of, you can come in and buy my $100 bond for 95. Not only do you get the 2, 3, or 4% or whatever I'm earning, but when it accretes, which is the term we use when a bond goes from 95 back to 100, right? You get that $5 delta or that gap, right? So, I'm talking about trading here, Ryan. I'm not talking really about investing, and I'm not an advocate for trying to trade bonds or regularly trading stocks for that matter. But what I am talking about is understanding, especially if you're on a fixed income or you're about to be on a fixed income, is understanding the relationship. I wrote a whole chapter in my book about this, between interest rates and fixed income. In bonds, like anything else, they're not bad, they're not good. It's just you need to understand what you own. So if you as an investor put $100,000, you buy 10 bonds and you pay $100 for each bond, right? And you put that money in, and then one day you realize that your 100,000 is only worth $950 because all the bonds dropped to $95, right? And you say, "Oh my gosh, I'm down 5%. This is a terrible investment. What have I done?" And then you sell all your stuff for $95 to Tammy because he knows it's going to accrete back to 100, right? So what your statement, this is where people go wrong, and where I think advisors make a mistake, is not to educate their clients to say, look, if I bought you fixed income, as long as it doesn't default, it doesn't matter what the statement says over the next 12 months or the next 24 months or for the next 36 months, depending on the term of the bond. In 10 years, let's say you bought a 10-year bond, assuming the U.S. Treasury doesn't default, and we're not going to get into that silly argument.
That's a whole different thing.
But assuming it doesn't, your $100 bond will come back to you at $100, right? So getting all bent out of shape because it's trading at 95 or 93, or in some cases right now, 60 or $70, as long as it's a high-quality bond for a high-quality company or a government or whatever, your expectation is that it will mature at par. So you selling now while your bond's trading at $60 or $50 or $100 or $95 is a complete waste of time and a terrible idea.
Yeah, absolutely. And one last thing, the inflation bit that you mentioned when they say, yeah, well, it is yielding 4%, but inflation is 8%. But let's think about it. How is that going to be really affecting you? And there's a one case scenario when it would, if inflation stays at 8% for the entire time the bond is, let's say, live.
Right. So that would have been a bad investment if inflation stays at 8% forever. Right. But we know it won't, because people who get elected to office will cease to be elected to office if they don't get this figured out. Right?
Absolutely.
So the reality is it won't stay that way. So you're saying, oh, it's 4% bond, 8% inflation, bad deal. Sure, if it stays at 8%, but if you buy a 4% bond and inflation comes back to historic norms of 2 or 3%, then it's a really, really good deal. And you're going to look back and say, man, I wish I had extended the term on that 4 or 5% bond. I'm not advocating one way or another in terms of where interest rates will or will not go, or inflation will or will not go. But understand the dynamic historically.
Absolutely, yes. And let's not forget inflation. It's 12 months. So the number you see here is the difference between this month and 12 months before.
Brian, you got all that?
I've got all of that. I've been taking notes furiously. My paper's literally on fire. It's a lot to go through. And I've got kind of a question after this, so we'll come back with more. It's Only Money on Real Radio 104.1. Welcome back to It's Only Money here on Real Radio 104.1. I'm here with financial advisors from Edgewater Family Wealth. EdgewaterFamilyWealth.com is the website. We have Scott Brown and his right-hand man, Tammy. I'm Ryan from the Monsters in the Morning. And as you're going to break, I did say I had a question. And my question was brought up when you said you have to educate your clients to come in, because a lot of people don't know money like you guys do. You know, you studied it. You've gone to school for this various kind of thing. When a client comes in and they really don't have a full grasp of the things that you do, what is the education process that you give to a new client?
Well, I mean, I hate to say it varies by client, but it does. I mean, some people come in with varying levels of understanding, right? You know, there are people who are completely ignorant, not because they're ignorant people, just because it doesn't interest them, right? They've come in, they've hired us. They say, look, here's the thing I did, here's the money I have. However I came by that money, inheritance, or worked my whole life, or say, however they did it, they're just not that interested in money, which I get, which is a lot of people, by the way. You'd be surprised, right? Scott, it's a matter of trust. We have a relationship with you. We believe in you. We've been working with you. My aunt worked with you. My brother worked with you. Whatever it is, do your thing, right? And that's cool. But I typically, I don't want to say I insist, but I try to get people to educate a little bit, because an educated client's easier to talk to. So the example is what we were just talking about, right? Fixed income. If every time the client walks through the door, I have to tell that story again and again and again. Remember, we talked about the bonds. This is how they work. And they come in, they're upset, my account's down, which is understandable. But if I educate them, if I say, look, when you buy a bond, this is how it works. So interest rates do this, the bond price does that. Interest rate do another thing, this is what the bond price will do. And understand the dynamics of term and quality and defaults and all these things that are part of a discussion around the education around bonds. If I can do that adequately in the beginning, then that saves us a lot of time. We can move on to other conversations, right? But if I have to re-educate the client in every meeting, it becomes difficult, right? Because it's hard for you to make progress. So my goal, and I don't really have a problem with this, is I try to educate clients so that we can have more meaningful conversations. Because every conversation is, this is how the stock market works. Sometimes it goes up and sometimes it goes down. And this is how the bond market works.
I remember you saying that.
Yeah. Some people say that. But it's really helpful to me as an advisor. And I can see people over time, a client that comes to me in the first year, they have these kinds of questions, right? And then year 2, they have a different kind of question. And in year 3, and eventually we're speaking not the exact same language, but we're speaking a similar language. And for me, that's a time saver, right? Because we have things to do. People, the clients, if they're entrepreneurs or business people, or they're retired and they just want to go to Europe, right? They have things to do. So the more efficient we can be with our conversation, the better off the relationship's going to be. And the way we can be more efficient is to be educated. Tammy, would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. An educated client is easier to talk to, because there's a lot of concepts out there. And I think Scott agrees with me here that they keep coming out, especially if they watch any kind of media outlet, and it might scare people off.
Yeah. So that comes, media is not a help. I'm not one of those fake news guys, but I also know that sometimes to sell ad space, I don't care what you're in, I don't care what network it is, they're selling you something. All they want is your attention. Enrage and engage, baby. That's the model, right?
Yeah, we don't make enough people angry on this
show.
show.
We got to really upset some
We got to scare them into buying, I don't know, copper,
gold, I don't know, pearls, I don't know, oyster shells, I don't know. Get your custom Scott Brown oyster shell. So, so know when you're watching media, like some of the periodicals, the magazines that are out there, and I don't want to call anybody out, but that's what they do. They write articles about 10 ways your financial advisor is ripping you off, or 7 ways the stock market is a scam, or 3 ways, 4 ways, 8 ways, 9 ways. We love lists in this country.
And it's always odd numbers.
Right. We like countdown. Oh, I can't wait to get to 1. Wonder what 1 is. Wonder how he's ripping me off. What's the number 1 way he's ripping me off? Right. So we love that stuff. So you have to take that with a grain of salt. And again, I think that educating people, eliminate, because there's more information than you can shake a stick at, right? You Google financial planning, you Google IRA, you Google, stocks and bonds, best stocks and bonds. You'll find an article that tells you the whole thing's a scam, the market's a scam, the stock market's not real, it's really in the basement somewhere with people in cloaked and candles and daggers and such. I mean, you can find anything you want to find, and most of it is negative because that's what engages people. We engage with fear, which, I mean, that's our whole political system at this point, is fear-based. That person's out to get you. That person's out to get you. Here's the top 10 reasons that person's out to get you, right? That kind of stuff. So I do think education's critical, and I do really enjoy when a client wants to just put aside the statements, put aside all of the, we do the 30 seconds on the market and the economics and my theories on what the Fed's going to do and all that stuff. And we talk about real planning. We talk about real education. We talk about what really matters.
That, do you find that you get like a lot of just like head nodding though? And how do you tell the difference?
I can tell. And that's why I think, that's why I don't love Zoom. That's why I don't love phone calls. That's why clients will say to me, I literally have a client who gives me a hard time because I insist she and I meet once a year. Mm-hmm. And I've told her numerous times, she's a wonderful gal, one of my favorite human beings on the planet. But I will say she'll say, why do we always have to get together? She's a little cantankerous. Why do we? And I said, because that way I can look in your face and see if you're lying to me. And what I mean, and she takes it well. It's obviously tongue in cheek, but what I mean by that, it's a little true in so much that I don't want to see nodding. I don't want to see because in a good market, they're like, yeah, everything's great. Their body language is good, and they're happy, and they're skipping. But I need them to understand the other side of that, and I need to see it in their face that they understand it, and that they understand what they're going to do when that happens, right? Because when everything's good, everybody's happy, skipping along. It's always going to be that way. It's immediacy bias. Whatever happened yesterday is going to happen today, and we see the opposite of it right now. We see market's not doing great. Bond market's not doing great. Depending on who you ask, the economy's doing great over here, but not over there. And that's what people are connected to now. Yesterday, the market was bad. Tomorrow, the market's bad. It's not how it works. And so I need to see their face and see that they understand what we're going to do when the other thing happens, good or bad.
Yeah, it seems to be just human nature. Like I've done this when I've tried to explain things to people, and then they'll it's almost like people are afraid to tell you that they're not grasping something.
Yes.
And so to save face, they'll just be like, yeah, of course I understand. And they'll have I've definitely done it in the past, and probably will do it again in the future. But it's just something about being a human that you're like, well, I don't want him to think I'm an idiot. He seems like a smart man.
Yeah, there is an element of that, people will nod, as you said, but I can usually tell. And I'm
you should give them a test.
When
you're done, you're done. You're like, okay, here's 10 questions.
Failed, get out of here. Take your money and go. But no, I want to see that. I want to see that they understand. And I do fear sometimes, like when I talk to somebody on the phone, it's harder for me to perceive if they're like, okay, yeah, well, that's great. You get that kind of thing. And there is, oftentimes people don't want to admit they don't know something. So they nod in approval, and then they go outside and talk to their spouse, and they're like, you didn't get that? And, he or she is like, no, I didn't get that. And that's not a good place to be. So and I'm a storyteller, as everybody can clearly tell. And I think it helps to tell people stories that I did it literally yesterday. I did a 401k meeting where there were, 5-10 people in the room, a small company. And I just sat at a conference table with them, and I told them stories. And they literally said to me, nobody has ever spoken to us with regard to investing that way. Nothing anecdotal. It's just a Roth IRA is a tax-deferred vehicle that when extracted from, and it's like, well, kill me.
Wow.
Please make him stop, right? So I'm telling them literal success stories after 36 years in the business to say, this is how this person succeeded. This is why this person didn't succeed, right? It's empirical evidence one way or the other, right? So it's not, again, some boring, dry story or non-story about how a Roth versus a traditional IRA, which makes people want to stab themselves in the face.
Yeah, but
it's the human element.
Yeah, no face stab in 30 years. No face stab.
No, nobody stabbed.
That's good. That's good. Well, it's just interesting because like money is something that like we all use, so we all think we know about. But I think from hearing you talk, it's the difference between like I know how to drive a car, I don't know how a car works.
Right.
Like, like I couldn't get into the engine and figure it out. And it seems like you're the guy that's like, yeah, this bam here, move this. And that can be intimidating for sure to like come into, because I've talked to other money people before, and they will speak jargon a lot. That's why I like this show. Like by the time I leave, I might not know the concept right out the gate, but by the time segment ends, I'm like, okay, I'm with you now.
Well, I think, and again, I warn against that because if an advisor is using jargon, right, that means they don't understand the topic. Because jargon, I don't care what industry you're in, whether you're a doctor or whatever, if you cannot take the complex as a professional, I don't care what you are, doctor, lawyer, plumber, electrician, whatever, if you can't take the jargon and make it and define it or explain it in a fashion that other people who aren't in your business can understand, you're not an expert. Plain and simple. If you can't translate it into simple terms, any idiot can make the complex, right? It takes true thoughtfulness to make the complex simple enough that people are comfortable with it. I find when people, it happens to me, I go to conferences all over the country, and when I'm sitting in a meeting with some money manager and I don't understand a damn thing he's saying, I'm like, look, I've been doing this 36 years. Can you just explain it to me in terms that I can understand? And if you can't do that, that tells me you don't understand it well enough.
And that's why it takes someone like a scientist like Neil deGrasse Tyson, like that's
perfect.
Why he's famous, because like by the time he's done talking, I'm like, I get quantum physics.
Yeah. I never reached that conclusion, by the way, but I do understand what he's saying.
Yeah, exactly.
I do understand what he wants me to understand.
Well, if you want to understand more, stick around. We'll be right back with more It's Only Money here on Real Radio 104.1. Welcome back to It's Only Money here on Real Radio 104.1 with financial advisors from Edgewater Family Wealth. That's Scott Brown and Tammy. EdgewaterFamilyWealth.com is the website. I'm Ryan, and we're just hanging out with you this morning, trying to not make you rich, because Scott has never made anyone rich.
Nope.
But we are talking
I made
about
Tammy rich. Tammy's a billionaire
with information.
He just loves to come here. He's only here for the numbers. Really.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
And he actually finances that song. He paid he paid a whole crew,
an orchestra.
Yeah. Hans Zimmerman actually composed the Tammy's Number song. But okay, so one of the things I've been wanting to ask you, and just because this is very personal for me at the moment right now. So I used to, my brother once gave me a set of tapes of like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, right? Old Robert Kiyosaki. And one of the things that stuck with me was like having different sources of income. Like it was like, when you think of a guy who owns a business, he just owns that business and it makes money from that. And then the Rich Dad, Poor Dad's like, well, you got to have several things, streams of income. And he's kind of tossing it around like that. So I've kept that in my mind. And I tell my fiance, I'm like, look, we've been saving up money. We got enough. We should get a rental property, and just one that, because there's a lot of houses that gone up for sale just down the street, and I'm all about just, if I have to go to work, walking like 2 houses over. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it doesn't, I guess, fully make sense to her. And I suppose me a little bit, where it's like, okay, how are we going to make money? Well, we have to put all of this money down and then we'll take it back slowly each month and eventually we'll make money. And she goes, that doesn't sound like a good plan. And I can't come up with a way to explain it to where that is a good plan.
Well, I mean, I think it is. So there's so many things to unpack here. I mean, first of all, where you're going, let's start with the end and then work backwards. The end is where you're going is you want a piece of real estate, an asset. A home, we all can agree a home or a rental property is an asset, right? So there's what some people would call debt, and then there's liabilities, right? So debt is kind of felt like that's bad. That is bad.
Right.
I bought a car or I bought some consumer good, and we can talk about consumer goods. It's not always bad. But just as a general statement, if I get a bunch of debt, I borrow a bunch of money to buy a depreciating asset like a car or I don't know, a phone or whatever, we consider that maybe bad. But there's a difference between debt and liability, right? Because a liability is something you owe on an asset, right? So you go out, you buy a rental home. Yeah, you buy a $200,000 house, you got to put 30, 40 grand down, and you say, oh, that's bad. I gave away 30 or 40 grand, but you didn't. You didn't give it away. It's in the asset, right? The asset is the house, right? So you didn't give it away. It's still there. It's just in a theoretically appreciating asset. We know over time homes tend to appreciate. Might be 3%, might be 5%, might be 10% if you're really lucky, but on average, homes appreciate. We can agree upon that. So the idea is then you would get a renter, right? So the renter has, that's a human being, and they have value to you in so much that they're going to pay the rent, right? So if the rent at least covers your mortgage, then you say, okay, well, thank you very much. I'm providing you value. You need shelter. You maybe can't afford a home or aren't interested in a home for whatever reason, or you're just here temporarily, whatever the thing is, you're providing value to that person, right? They needed that place. You gave them the place, right? In return for that, they pay you an agreed upon amount. You take that agreed upon amount, and maybe it's more than your mortgage, and maybe you can pocket 100 of the 1,500 they're paying you. Maybe it's not. Maybe you're just paying down the mortgage, but cut to 10 years later, 15 years later, 20, 30 years later, for sure, the home is paid for. That 1,500 or some inflation adjusted number maybe of 2,000 is going directly into your pocket as a recurring revenue stream, right? So I think the first thing you got to say to yourself is to your fiance is to say, well, we're not spending the money. That's different. If we went on a trip or we bought a car, or we bought some frivolous item, a couch or whatever. Not to say you don't need a couch, but to say
we actually just sit on the floor.
Yeah, so I'm not recommending
nice, yes.
sitting on the floor, but you bought something that 20 years from now isn't going to be around. That's spending the money. The difference is you're investing the money. So I'm not one of those. First of all, I'm not one of those financial advisors who thinks you should only own mutual funds or stocks or bonds. It's when you run into one of those characters that says, no, sell all your real estate and get rid of all your recurring revenue and give it all to me, that's what you're dealing with. You're dealing with a salesperson, right? That's not a financial advisor. That's not a wealth advisor. A wealth advisor would say, no, you got some rental property. Do you hate managing it? That's the first question. And if the answer is, no, I'm fine. I mean, it has its days, good days and bad days, but I'm fine with it. Then keep it, right? Because what Tammy and I know, when a person comes in and they've got Social Security and they've got a little bit of a pension, which we can talk about in a second, or they have rental property, or maybe they've invented something that pays them some kind of royalty, right? Those are guaranteed income streams. And when you model guaranteed income streams for a client and you say, okay, you need $10,000 a month to live on. And they go, yes, that's correct. And you go, all right, cool. Oh, you're going to get $1,500 from Social Security. Is that correct? Yes, that's correct. You're going to get $2,000 from royalties. That's correct. Oh, and you have $3,000 worth of rental income net to you after you pay expenses. That's correct. So that's $6 or $7 grand. And then they say, but I still need 10. I go, yeah, well, that's where your investments come in, right? So the stock market's up and down. We know that. We know that it's going to go up. We know it's going to go down. We know returns are going to vary. And hopefully we are in the 6, 7, or 8% that markets have given us over the last 100 years, right? But that's a variable. We can't control that variable. Whereas the income stream, the pension, the royalty, and what was another one? Oh, rental income, right? Those are things that are pretty steady and understandable, and we can kind of count on. So when we model that for a client who doesn't have guaranteed income streams, and all of their money has to come from markets, their success probabilities go down, right? So if you have more guaranteed income streams, your potential for success is much higher. If I have a client that comes in and they've got a pension, I have a lot of former military officers as clients. And when they come in, oftentimes they have 30, 40, 50, 60, sometimes $90,000 is the pensions I've seen.
No.
Right? Now they may say, well, Scott, I live a pretty good life. I like to spend 120, 140, 150, which is cool. But I know 90 of it plus Social Security. So maybe 110, 120 of it's coming from a guaranteed income source. Right? So really what I need to account for with their 500 grand or million or 2 or 3 or 4, whatever the number is just the delta between the 150 and the guaranteed income stream. And if a stream is guaranteed, like it's an annuitization or a pension or whatever, your likelihood of success is extremely high by comparison to somebody who walks in and they say, Scott, look, I need 250 grand a year and I have $5 million. Well, we can all do the math. That's 5%. That's not hard. It's not like a reach. It's not something you should be worried about, but it's not a guaranteed income stream. The market could do poorly for 10 years in a row, like it did from 2000 to 2010, which will leave you biting your nails, right? But if you had for part of that income, again, rental income, or even something like municipal bonds, right? Municipal bonds are boring. They're tax-free. But right now we can get what, 3, 4, 5% on munis. If let's say when you were planning in your 30s, you said, I'll make up a number, 10 grand a year, 20 grand a year. And again, I know some people can't afford that, but we can talk about that part later, is if I could put that kind of money away, maybe I put it in a bond so that in 30 years I have a portfolio of bonds that are always coming due, but also churning out $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 worth of tax-free income, right? I mean, that's something I'm an advocate for my higher end clients, is to say, why don't we, if you don't have a pension or you don't have some guaranteed income stream, why don't we start to build a little bit of a recurring income stream through high quality, AAA, boring City of Orlando or whatever it is, bonds, so that's kind of our rock. And we base our lifestyle off that rock. And again, whether the rock's muni bonds, whether the rock's corporate bonds, whether the rock is rental income, whether the rock is you sold your business and there's an income stream from it, or some annuity or pension or whatever it is, that rock is what gives you the stability when markets are performing poorly.
Now I only just want to see a movie starring The Rock.
He's got one coming out, I see.
He always does.
He's like a dark superhero. Or
now
something.
There's a guy who's a diversified cat.
Oh man, he's a beast, not only physically, but I mean economically. He's got talk about income streams. The guy's got a production company. He's got all kinds.
Tequilas,
yeah. What's with the tequila, by the way? Clooney has tequila. The Rock has tequila. How much tequila are we selling in this country?
The profit margin on that is so crazy high.
You know who started that? Sammy Hagar.
Yeah, Cabo Wabo.
And I think he sold that for like $70 million.
Yeah, I think it was more than that. It was a crazy amount of money. Yeah. And it makes me immediately want to go buy a whiskey still.
Get started.
Well, we have a whiskey for the monsters that we just put together.
I saw that.
It's good, but I was so surprised to learn that like half the price of the bottle it goes to taxes. I didn't realize they were taxed like cigarettes.
Syntax.
Yeah. So lovely to do that. Just out of my own curiosity, what's the easiest way to get a some kind of income stream? Is it through dividends? Is it like the fastest, quick and easy, dirty way?
Well, I mean, again, people have varying. This is where it becomes individually based, and people hate to hear they want one size fits all. Everybody do this, and it'll be great. People have different interests. They have different levels of attention. They have different levels or types of enjoyments, right? So some people love rental real estate. That's. I'm not saying that's easy. It's not. And again,
no, it's a job.
It's toilets break. Things happen. Tenants are jerks sometimes. Sometimes they're wonderful. Sometimes they're not. But it ain't their property, so they ain't going to treat it that way.
They do not. My dad had like 30 rental properties at one point.
Yeah.
And I would have to go with him to go do various things. And if people, because that's what I think about. She's like, when we talk about a rental property, I'm like, I don't think you understand like what you have if you don't have a management company.
Yeah,
I'm in there plunging. I'm in there fixing AC. I don't know how to do anything.
So none of this is quote unquote easy. This isn't the easy show. That's you'll see that at 1:00 in the morning on some weird network. But this really the reality is it's rental real estate's a good way. Bonds are an interesting way, and we can talk more about that when we come back.
One of these days, I'm going to get you real clickbaity, and I'm going to be able to be like, Scott, what's the easiest way? And then you're going to tell me, and I'm like, got him. But your answers are always like, well, it takes time, and you have to be diligent and make good decisions.
This is why nobody talks to me at parties.
I know. But you can listen to more of Scott and Tammy and myself. We'll be right back with more It's Only Money here on Real Radio 104.1. Welcome back to It's Only Money here on Real Radio 104.1. It's the last segment of the show. Thank you for hanging out with us, everybody. I'm here with Scott Brown and Tammy from Edgewater Family Wealth. Again, that website, edgewaterfamilywealth.com. You can get access to all the past shows. There's Fin Talks with Tammy. There's blogs, especially the most important part is the ability to contact them. So go to edgewaterfamilywealth.com and check that out. Now, I'm not going to let this go, Scott.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not, because I know you have an answer.
I do.
which is what is the easiest way to get a stream of income on the side. There has to be a way to do that.
Yeah. There's a little side hustle people don't know that much about. It's called Social Security. So you get a job.
Scott.
What you do is you get yourself a job, right?
Yeah.
And then they mandatorily extract funds from you to put in a big basket somewhere in Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
First, they take a bunch of it off the top and burn it in a barrel somewhere.
That's what it feels like.
Yeah. But whatever's left, they will later send to you in the form of a guaranteed income stream. So that's everybody's got that, right? And again, I don't want to hear about it's going to go away or this, that, or the other. Maybe, but argue with your friend about that over coffee. I don't want to hear it. It's the reality is it exists now. I suspect it will exist in the future. So Social Security is a great example of that. And, back in the day, and I've used my father as an example for years, is my dad worked for the St. Petersburg Times for 37 years. And when he retired, he got, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of 2/3 of his income. So whatever he made, he got 2/3 of it. Still shows up in his mailbox it probably doesn't go to the mailbox, does it? Probably goes electronically somewhere. But he still gets it, right? And that was the ultimate, and that's really what our grandparents came to appreciate. They worked for GE or they worked for Bell South or AT&T or IBM. Even companies here locally like Martin Marietta, they have pensions still. Disney has a pension still. I don't know that new people can participate in it. They are expensive to maintain for obvious reasons. The liabilities on pensions are really tough on some companies and certainly on municipalities. And then government workers, they have pensions, right? So military, if you're in the military for 20 years, you get a pension, right? So that's why a lot of my officers have pensions. So that's not to be ignored or not appreciated. It's really helpful to have that income stream. As a financial advisor, I like to see it. It's like, oh, okay, you have some rental property. Let's add that in. And what I see is, and I hope I can do a good job of explaining this, but when you come into my office and you say, I want to spend $50,000 a year, I have this much money, I save this much money, this is a lifestyle I want to lead, this is the type of investing I'm comfortable with, whatever. And we say you have a 75% chance of success, Tammy, when we look back over 100 years to do what you just told me you wanted to do before you die. That's cool, and that's not a bad number. But what we see is the 90%, the 95% people, the people who almost can't screw it up, have at least a portion of their income comes in a guaranteed income stream. So I would say the best ways to do that, especially if you're young, right? If you're 60, maybe that, you're not putting that toothpaste back in the tube, so to speak, and we all have to find other ways to do that for you through fixed income or whatever. Your options are somewhat limited at that point, potentially. But if you're young and you're saying, I'm planning for the future, I think one of the things we don't tell people enough, and by we, I mean my industry, because to be honest with you, my industry doesn't make money if you don't invest in mutual funds and annuities and products and stuff. We manage our money in-house, so we don't do that type of stuff. But to be fair, we wouldn't get paid anything if everybody had everything in rental income, which I'm not suggesting. What I am suggesting is if you have the opportunity to invest liquid, meaning stocks and bonds, and the opportunity to maybe get a rental piece of real estate or buy into some limited partnership that buys real estate, or involve yourself in a pension plan or involve yourself in buying munis that will do that. That should be part of your diversification. And in my business, they don't talk about this near enough, if at all. You're never going to see an ad in Money Magazine that says, hey, man, you should buy rental real estate. That's not a thing, right? Because Wall Street doesn't make any money if you buy rental real estate. They want you to buy a mutual fund or an annuity or something like that. So a real wealth planner has that conversation. When a client comes into my office, I build them a balance sheet. Now, you wouldn't think about that for a financial advisor, but we literally build a balance sheet. What do you own? What is it worth? What is your debt? What is the income it produces? And how do we, as your advisors, need to help you subsidize that, if at all? Sometimes it's not at all. Sometimes it's a lot. Sometimes it's a little. But the reality is, a good wealth advisor is not just interested in your brokerage statement or your bank statement, right? If you go to somebody and they say, well, let me see your statement. Oh, that stuff's all terrible. Move it to me. Take their stuff and buy my stuff, right? That's the conversation 70 to 80% of the time. That's not how the conversation should go. It'd be like, all right, tell me about your history. Tell me what you've done. Do you have rental real estate? Do you have royalties? Do you have a pension? What are your plans for 20 years down the road? And do you want to leave money to charity? And what are the tax implications? And what is your tax bracket? Let me see your taxes. Yada. It shouldn't just be you have bad stuff. Let me give you the good stuff. And so building a recurring revenue stream is not easy, but it's certainly doable.
It feels very exposed. Like when you give to you all this information. Like if it was me giving you all my stuff, it would just be me apologizing for about 5 to 10 minutes as you like pour over the documents.
Yeah. Is it like going to the dentist?
It does feel like like have you been flossing? And you go, yeah, and they know you have not been flossing. Yeah. And it's got to be the same way when you look at somebody's face. You're like, yeah, of course I've been doing this, and then you're just like, of course you have.
Yeah, well, there is, and I think that's a big problem because people do feel that way. Oftentimes, I'll be referred to somebody, and they'll say, oh, yeah, so and so says I should come see you, and they're like, but I don't, and they mumble and they trail off, and then they'll reach back out again in 6 months. I should come, and they trail off, and then you don't hear from them again for a year, right? And a lot of that is embarrassment, and that's the problem, right? We've stigmatized. Well, actually, I don't even think we have stigmatized it. I mean, most people are not wealthy, right? Or most people have not done the plan. Statistically, we know people are living paycheck to. We know this isn't.
But there's a level of embarrassment to that.
There is,
because we're sold on like the American dream. We're supposed to be successful, and if we're not doing as good as somebody that we see on whether TV or down the road,
we suck. I get it.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like, what if you did that with your health? Well, I got this big growth coming out of my head, but I don't want anybody to see that. I don't want the doc. Did you put that growth on your head on purpose? No, it's not. I get that it is. I do. And it actually, to be fair, I didn't really get that for the first little bit of my career. I was like, why are these people being so defensive? Why are they so nervous? Why are they? And when they're nervous and defensive, they can be adversarial. Like now you're coming in to defend your turf. Like, well, this is why this happened to me. Yeah. Right. Like, I'm not judging. I'm here to fix. Why you went to the mechanic? It's like, again, Seinfeld episode. If the mechanic chewed you out for your car being broken, well, how'd you let that clutch go? Tell me about that, right? No, just fix it. Help me fix it.
I've had that happen before.
The mechanic yelled at you?
Yes. Yeah. And it was, I stopped getting oil changes regularly because of it, because I was like, I'm not going back to this guy. And it was like,
yeah.
So yeah, I do see it. But the thing about it is as much like a medical person, you give the symptoms and then you're like, yeah, I know how to fix this. I know how to cure your financial disease.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Well, and like a doctor, the answer isn't always here's a pill. Right. Like a doctor would say to you, well, your blood pressure is a little high, your cholesterol's a little high, or whatever, you're taking in too much sugar, you're pre-diabetic, whatever it is. And they're like, all right, well, where's the pill? And they're looking around, waiting for the prescription. He's like, no, get off your ass and do something. I mean, that's a thing.
It's like financial exercising you have to do.
You sometimes have to do the financial push-ups.
Interesting. I guess a real quick question at the end we got from our listener, and I don't have it right in front of me, but I do. It said, on your last show, you said if you're going to look for somebody who is wealthy, but what if you don't have that in your family? Was essentially the question. It was because you said, I believe, something along the lines of like, oh, talk to your mom, or like, but this person, the gist of their email was like, I come from a poor family. No one's good with money. Who do I turn to? Who do I look at?
Well, I mean, I find it hard to believe you can't find somebody in your life, whether it's your boss or somebody. You just see somebody who appears, and sometimes appearances are wrong. So a guy's rolling up in an expensive car doesn't mean he's rich. It just means he has an expensive car, right? So that's not a good indicator. But somebody who seems to be thoughtful, seems to, take things in stride, give sound but not crazy, get rich. You don't want the crypto guy. I'm not picking on crypto. I'm not saying crypto is not valid or there aren't things about crypto that are interesting. What I am saying is there's always that crypto mob guy that's like, when you don't even want to make eye contact, right? It's not that guy, right? It's somebody who's diversified, somebody who, again, maybe a business owner. Maybe you walk into the restaurant or the insurance agency or whatever it is. People, again, successful people are willing to share. They didn't become successful by being miserly with money or their knowledge. Somebody helped them. There's none of us who have been successful in business, not a single one of us have done it by ourselves. Somebody helped us. Somebody mentored. To this day, I'll be 58 years old in 3 weeks. By the way, I wear a large. I like the color, I like a nice tan shirt in case anybody's interested.
Large, okay.
But I'll be 58 in a few weeks. I have 2 or 3 mentors I converse with regularly. I seek them out. I bug them. Here's what I'm thinking about. Go find those people. Those people love that. If you call up the principal of your old high school, or I'm trying to think of another example, some local leader that you see as successful that you read about in the paper, and say, hey, you know, I'm 22, I'm 19, I'm 27. I'm just trying to get better. Could I have lunch with you? The answer is going to be yes most of the time, because people love to do it. And my point in discussing it last time was people like to scapegoat successful people because they're bitter. They don't know how it happened. They feel like they're being robbed of something. And then they'll say, well, that guy in the corner office or that gal who's really successful is only because of this. Well, jump over that idiot and go to the person they're pointing at and ask them how they did it.
That is great advice. And if you want more great advice and just great financial advice, check out edgewaterfamilywealth.com. Edgewaterfamilywealth.com is the website. They have the contact section. We've got past episodes on there. They're a lot of fun. We've done 30-something episodes at this point. Go check those out. Also, Financial Talks with Tammy, along with an amazing blog section as well. If you want to email the fellas, you can email them at edgewaterfamilywealth@raymondjames.com. And gentlemen, I hope you have a beautiful rest of your Sunday.
You as well.
Likewise.
All right, we'll see you next time on It's Only Money here on Real Radio 104.1.
Yeah, and clearly people are rich, right? Or wealthy. You don't have to be rich. I like the term wealthy better. I mean, to rich reminds me of like the Monopoly guy or something. But, you know, there are people, there are regular people.
Now that guy I trust.
Yeah,
See, the problem, Scott, you don't have a monocle.
Monocle is, now, if you can meet a guy with a monocle, I mean, like, I'm all in.
What was his financial advice? He said buy Park Place?
Where is that?
Where is that? I can't find it.
Tune in to It's Only Money with Scott Brown from Edgewater Family Wealth, Sunday mornings at 7 on Real Radio 104.1. Raymond James Financial Services, Inc., member FINRA SIPC. Edgewater Family Wealth is not a broker-dealer, is independent of RJFS.